Your baby is asleep in the next room. You and your partner are in the kitchen. Voices have gotten sharp. Nobody shouted. Nobody slammed anything, just tension. The kind that fills a room without making a sound. In another room, your sleeping baby's brain is already responding. Not with movement, not with sound, with measurable, specific neural activity in the regions that process threat. Researchers discovered this by placing sleeping infants inside MRI scanners. What activated in those scans was the finding that changed how developmental scientists think about conflict in the home permanently. The natural assumption: a sleeping baby registers nothing. They are unconscious. Whatever happens in the house while they sleep is irrelevant to them. That assumption was held as established developmental thinking for decades. It felt completely logical. Then in 2013, Alice Graham, a developmental neuroscientist at the University of Oregon, placed sleeping infants inside fMRI scanners. An fMRI scanner, meaning functional magnetic resonance imaging, measures real-time blood flow changes inside the brain. It shows exactly which regions are active at any moment. What those scanners showed ended the sleeping baby assumption permanently. Graham's study was published in Psychological Science in 2013. Infants aged 6 to 12 months were placed inside the scanner during natural sleep. While they slept, the researchers played 3 categories of audio through headphones at controlled volumes: angry adult voices, happy adult voices, neutral adult voices. The scanner measured brain activity in response to each category. The sleeping babies showed no behavioral response. No waking, no movement, no visible reaction. The brain scans told a completely different story. Think of the MRI scanner like a thermal imaging camera pointed at a building at night. The building looks dark and still from outside. The camera reveals which rooms are active, which systems are running, which areas are generating heat. Your sleeping baby looked completely still. The scans showed the opposite of stillness inside. When angry voices played, specific brain regions activated. Regions associated with processing stress. Regions associated with threat detection. Regions associated with emotional regulation. Here is where Graham's finding became significant. Babies from higher conflict home environments did not show weaker responses to the angry voices. They showed stronger ones. The nervous system most exposed to conflict was the most sensitized to detect it, even at lower volumes, even during sleep. 3 specific findings from the MRI scans. Finding 1. The threat processing region activated first. The region that activated most consistently to angry voices was the anterior cingulate cortex. The anterior cingulate cortex, meaning the front section of the brain's midline regulatory center, handles 2 primary jobs. It monitors for conflict and threat, and it regulates the stress response that follows detection. Think of it like an air traffic control tower, monitoring all incoming signals simultaneously. The tower does not decide which flights matter after they land. It tracks them continuously from the moment they enter the airspace. Your sleeping baby's threat monitoring region was tracking the angry voice signal the moment it entered their auditory field, below the level of conscious awareness. Without waking, finding 2, the response scaled with home conflict level. Babies in higher conflict home environments showed significantly greater brain activation. In response to the same recorded angry voices, same audio file, same volume, measurably larger neural response, Graham's team concluded the nervous system had been calibrated to detect angry voice signals at lower thresholds. The brain had learned these signals require faster, stronger processing, calibration, meaning the adjustment of a system's sensitivity in response to repeated input does not require conscious experience. It happens through exposure alone. Finding 3. What happened after the conflict mattered more than the conflict itself. This was the finding that surprised Graham's team most. The pattern of brain activation in response to conflict was not the strongest predictor of long-term outcome. The presence or absence of a resolution signal was. The reason your sleeping baby's brain responds to angry voices comes down to a survival system that runs continuously below conscious awareness. Your baby's nervous system is designed to monitor the environment for threat signals at all times, not only when they are awake and alert. Continuously. Think of it like a seismic monitoring station built into the ground beneath a building. The station does not need anyone watching the instruments to record a tremor. It records constantly. The data accumulates whether or not anyone is monitoring. Gunnar at the University of Minnesota's Institute of Child Development spent 3 decades studying stress hormone patterns in infants. Her published research documents a specific finding. The primary stress hormone, cortisol, meaning the chemical messenger released by the adrenal glands during threat detection, rises in infants in response to conflict in the environment. This rise occurs without visible behavioral distress, without crying, without waking. The biological stress response activates before any outward sign appears. Gunnar also documented the long-term pattern. Infants with chronically elevated baseline cortisol from environmental conflict showed measurable differences in stress reactivity at age 3, and again at age 7. The seismic station does not only record single tremors, it builds a long-term picture of the environment's stability, and it adjusts the building's structural response accordingly. Patrick Davies at the University of Rochester spent decades studying what he calls emotional security theory. Emotional security theory is the framework for how parental conflict shapes a child's sense of environmental safety over time. His research identified what he called the completion signal. A completion signal is when conflict ends with visible, audible, behavioral evidence of resolution between the adults involved. Not just silence, not just the voices stopping. Actual resolution. Warmth returning, tone shifting back to baseline. Davies found that the presence of a completion signal produced measurably different long-term outcomes than the same conflict ending in silence. Your baby's nervous system operates on a question that never stops running. Is the threat resolved or is it ongoing? Silence does not answer that question. A completion signal answers it directly. Mark Cummings at the University of Notre Dame replicated this pattern independently across multiple studies. His research found that children from high-conflict homes who witnessed consistent conflict resolution showed emotional security outcomes similar to children from low-conflict homes. The conflict level was less predictive than the resolution pattern. Your baby's nervous system is not tracking how often arguments happen. It is tracking whether the threat signal completes. But here is the finding across all of this research that surprised the scientific community most. The babies in the highest conflict home environments were not the most dysregulated infants in the studies. Dysregulated means the stress response system is running outside its normal range. The most dysregulated infants were in homes where conflict occurred and then simply stopped, without resolution, without completion. Silence was registered by the nervous system as a threat that had not ended, not as peace. If this is new to you, subscribe to NeuralNursery. A new topic like this every single week. 3 things every parent should do with this research. First, when conflict happens near your baby, prioritize the resolution signal over the argument itself. Here is why this works. Davies' emotional security research at Rochester found that the resolution signal is the variable with the greatest predictive power for long-term outcome. Not conflict frequency, not conflict intensity. The presence or absence of visible resolution. Here is exactly what to do. After any argument near your baby, execute a visible, audible resolution within the same space your baby occupies. Even if your baby is asleep, you do not need to explain anything to your baby. You do not need to address them directly. You need their nervous system to receive the completion signal. Speak in your normal tone within earshot. Make physical contact with your partner if possible. A hand on the arm. A brief exchange of normal toned speech. Your baby's anterior cingulate cortex, meaning the threat monitoring region Graham identified, registers the shift from conflict signals to baseline signals. The threat assessment question, is this resolved or is it ongoing, receives an answer. That answer takes approximately 3 minutes of baseline behavior to to register reliably. 3 minutes of normal-toned presence after a conflict is the completion signal. That is what your baby's nervous system needs. Second, manage your voice register, not just your words. Here is why this works. Graham's MRI study used audio recordings of angry voices to trigger neural responses. The content of the words was not the variable. The emotional tone was, your baby's threat detection system is not processing language. It is processing prosody. Prosody means the rhythm, tone, pitch, and speed of speech. Prosody is the channel your baby's nervous system monitors continuously. Here is exactly what to do. When you feel an argument escalating, practice one specific behavior before volume increases. Drop your voice register, meaning the pitch of your speaking voice, by 1 level, not a whisper. 1 full level lower than your normal speaking pitch. John Gottman's research at the University of Washington's Relationship Research Institute found that voice tone de-escalation, meaning deliberately lowering vocal tone during conflict, was one of the highest impact single behaviors in reducing physiological escalation. In both speaker and listener simultaneously, your baby's nervous system responds to prosody. A lower pitch register at the moment of escalation changes the signal their brain receives. Before you have resolved a single word of the argument. Third, repair the environment, not just the relationship. Here is why this works. Gunnar's cortisol research at Minnesota found that the stress hormone response in infants is triggered by environmental conflict signals. The baby is monitoring the space, not tracking specific individuals. Here is exactly what to do. After conflict, restore the environmental signals your baby associates with safety. Familiar sounds, normal movement patterns, routine behaviors. If your baby is awake, a brief period of physical contact with calm vocal tone within 5 minutes of conflict resolution accelerates cortisol clearance. Cortisol clearance means the reduction of the stress hormone back to baseline levels. Gunnar's research showed that parental physical contact is the single most effective cortisol regulator available to an infant. Not time alone, not distraction. Physical contact with a calm, regulated caregiver. Hold your baby. Speak at your normal pitch. Resume a familiar routine. Your baby's nervous system is receiving 1 signal across all 3 of those behaviors. The threat is gone. This environment is safe again. Nobody told you that arguments near sleeping, babies were registering inside those sleeping brains. Nobody told you that the silence after a fight was the part your baby's nervous system was tracking most carefully. Nobody told you that the question never stops running. Is this environment safe or is it not? That is not a parenting failure. That is a gap in what parents have been told. Alice Graham did not run her MRI study to make parents feel worse about conflict. She ran it because the scientific community genuinely did not know what was happening inside sleeping babies' brains during household stress. Her team expected to find something. They did not expect the magnitude of what the scans showed. And the finding that surprised her team most was not the activation itself. It was the resolution finding. The discovery that babies from high-conflict homes who witnessed consistent resolution showed outcomes comparable to babies from low-conflict homes. Not because the conflict did not register. It did. But because the completion signal answered the question, the nervous system never stops asking. You will have arguments near your baby. That is not a question of character. It is a question of being human. What you do in the 3 minutes after those arguments is what your baby's brain is actually tracking. That is the moment that matters most. And now you know exactly what to do with it. Subscribe to NeuralNursery if you want to understand more of what is happening inside your baby's mind. A new topic every week. If this changed how you think about the environment around your baby, share it with another parent who has ever felt guilty about an argument that happened near their child. Next week, what babies actually hear when they are still in the womb. Harvard researchers documented what sound reaches a developing brain before birth. What your baby learned about your voice before they ever saw your face. You are not going to want to miss it.